Hey, what's up, everyone, and welcome back to the Dark Pixel Podcast. My name is Mike.
My name's Hat.
And I'm Eric.
Case and Landon weren't able to make it today. Rest in peace. Landon is sick. Cason had to go speak at like a youth event. Also, rest in peace. So we've got Hat and Eric with us. You guys might know them if you're on our Discord server. Active users there. They're supporters of the channel. Really love these guys. We actually played through Final Fantasy 13 together on the Patreon streams. So these guys were the ones that were on playing it alongside with me. So they have their own podcast as well on their channel, Phoenix Edge. You guys want to introduce that real quick, what you guys do there?
Yeah, basically what we do there is once a month we're trying to hit an in-depth review, analysis type deal of a specific RPG. That's actually what we focus on. So if you want to look us up, it's going to be Phoenix Edge RPG Podcast. But in between that one episode a month of whatever RPG we're choosing that month, we actually hit current event topics and different things regarding RPGs. So it's every Tuesday on Phoenix Edge RPG Podcasts on YouTube, and then you can also find it on iTunes.
So is that Phoenix with a PH or Phoenix with an F?
It's with the PH.
The PH. So you're not the Final Fantasy VI North American version SNES Phoenix Down spelling. You're the true Phoenix spelling. All right.
We're the legit Phoenix.
Okay, we got some great topics for you guys today. First one, we're going to be talking about the fact that the PlayStation Experience is coming up on December 9th and 10th, and Square-Enix is not listed as one of the exhibitors there. It seems that they will have no presence whatsoever. Talk about what that means for Final Fantasy VII Remake and Kingdom Hearts 3 and stuff like that. Second topic is going to be the fact that Sony Japan is closing down the Demon's Souls online servers in February. I think on February 28th. That's going to be worldwide. You will no longer be able to do any PvP or any online play in Demon's Souls. So we'll talk about that a little bit. Some people are speculating there might be a PS4 remaster or re-release of the game or something, but nothing really solid that backs that up. Third topic, Xenoblade 2 is coming out this week. It's coming out on Friday, I believe it is. And so we want to talk a little bit about what we want to see from it, what our predictions are for it. I have a long history with Xenoblade Chronicles, the first game. I'll talk about that and how this game has sort of like snuck up on me. I was like, whoa, it's out. Holy crap. I haven't been terribly excited for it. So we'll talk about that a little bit. And then we get into our viewer suggested topics. First, from BNK Militant. If Square remade Final Fantasy VI, would you rather the remake be similar to the Secret of Mana remake or the Final Fantasy VII remake? Okay. This one is from Hat89, who sits here among us. He asked, basically the question here is, what should happen within the first hour or two of an RPG in order to keep people engaged with it?
That's a good question.
It's a fantastic question.
Whoever wrote that, good job.
Just wait till you hear the next question.
The next question
next guy's an idiot.
Is from Velhart, or Eric here, who's with us. He asks, what do you believe that Western RPGs can learn from Japanese RPGs and vice versa? Okay, great question. Final question of the day. It's going to be a really quick one, actually. This is from Matthew, Kingdom Hearts fan from our Discord server. He's asking about all the Final Fantasy 13 discussion videos I've been putting out. When do I feel that a game deserves to get that kind of attention and that extreme in-depth analysis? And he's saying some people might be frustrated that I'm doing so many videos on it when they're not interested. When and why do I feel like a game should have that kind of attention put on it? Okay.
Cool.
So, let's move into the first topic. Square-Enix is not on the exhibitor list for the PlayStation Experience. For anyone who was thinking that we might have some information at all about the Final Fantasy VII Remake, I think post E3 and Tokyo Game Show, it was like this was kind of the last chance that we really had to get anything on that. But Square Enix is not going to be there, it seems, at all. This is, of course, the 30th anniversary of the Final Fantasy series, and it is the 20th anniversary of Final Fantasy VII itself. And we have had basically a couple of screenshots all year long in terms of news about the game. There have been some interviews that have been really, vague from Yoshinori Kitase and Tetsuya Nomura. We know that they've done a total restructure, internally within the company, where they've brought the production of the game back in-house, where it was being developed primarily by CyberConnect 2 before. So there are definitely some road bumps that have come up in the development. And mostly what I want to talk about with this is that it seems to me, when that was first announced, if you remember back to E3 2015, was it?
Sounds right.
2.5 years ago when this was announced. The level of excitement from the community in general was way up here. Just absolutely through the roof. People were like, what? No. I think no one expected it to happen because it had been asked for so long, and Square-Enix had for so long just kind of like dismissed it as ever being a thing they would do. And then it just kind of came out of left field, and it was just like, we're finally getting it. We're finally getting it. And then it feels like over the course of 2.5 years, that sentiment has changed from being incredibly excited to unbelievably doubtful and just cynical and feeling like there's no trust or belief that Square-Enix is going to satisfy players with this game. Of course, I'm not saying that everyone feels that way. I'm saying the general feeling that I get when I'm looking at people talking about it online is that there's a very big lack of trust. Final Fantasy 15 probably had something to do with that. A lot of players were very disappointed by Final Fantasy 15 for a myriad of reasons that we've all talked about many times. But additionally to that, it's just the lack of transparency about like where we are or when we can expect to hear anything. And I think the longer that goes on, the more doubtful and the more cynical people are going to get. And so my question is, was there, even if there was a good reason, let's discuss if there was a good reason to announce the game so early. And despite whether there was a good reason at the time, in hindsight, now that it's been 2.5 years and people's trust is starting to go like this, why would you ever announce a game that early if you don't have like a solid game plan for like when this is coming out? If you don't have a plan in action to, maybe they did, and then maybe things went wrong. I don't know. All I'm saying is that it can't be a good thing ever to announce a game this early when there was a risk of something going wrong, and then you have to just keep people in the dark forever. So what are you guys' thoughts on that?
I got two answers. One, make shareholders happy. Two, I just simply think they jumped the gun. Just the idea of just announcing stuff early, because that's kind of a thing that kind of happens with multiple game industries, or not industry, game companies, not just Square Enix, is they like to just announce something, show you like a CG scene, and then like not show you anything for it like 2 years later down the line. I know AAA companies like Ubisoft, Activision, EA have been famous for this in the past, and I think Square Enix may have just joined the bandwagon on that. And with like the shareholders, maybe there was just some doubt in the company, and they just needed something to boost it up right away. And maybe it was just a short-term solution and not necessarily a long one, because I'm always under the impression that you should only announce your game when you have a lot of information to give out already. Because that's why I liked when Bethesda announced like Fallout 4. It had they were able to show a lot, and on top of that, they were like, oh yeah, by the way, it's coming out this year. It's coming out in November, and it was announced in June of that year.
Go ahead, sorry. Well, I was going to say, I think the key with that, and I'll let you go back to that, but I think the takeaway point from that too is when they wait that long to release it or announce it, what they show you in the announcement, that all is going to be in the game. When you start to announce games years in advance, you still don't really have the concepts designed. You're not really quite sure what you're going to do. and then you start showing people these mock trailers of what it might be, that's only going to add to that discontent, because just naturally you're going to have stuff that's not in the game that they showed.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. But on top of that, they released Fallout 4 in November, and people didn't have to wait too long for that. They did a fine job building up hype before it. Nintendo did a similar fashion with Mario Odyssey. We had speculation of Mario Odyssey before, but we got a full announcement in June that came out in October. I guess that's me just being idealistic on how you do it. I don't know the reality of when you should announce games, but I really think that's the best time to do it. Announcing FF7 Remake in 2015, and it's almost 2018 now, and we barely have any information. That's pretty clear-cut signs that they jumped the gun way too early.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for me, when I heard that, I kind of found it baffling that we couldn't even get a screenshot. I was pretty disappointed in the past when they're like, oh, we're going to announce some Final Fantasy VII material. There's been some rumors, and then we get a screenshot, right? That's not very exciting, but at least that's something. So, the fact that we're not even getting that is kind of telling. But on the other hand, too, they may have looked at the fan base, and a lot of people are feeling that, hey, they announced it too early. So perhaps they're telling themselves, we're going to wait until we actually make some more headway with this game, which I'm okay with. But I think the actual 2015 release or the announcement, it's hard to tell, because from one perspective, you could say that Square intended on releasing it on its 20th anniversary, right? But obviously that hasn't happened, or it's not going to happen. So it just, maybe they intended for that to occur. But if that's the case, why did they, if they weren't further along, why did they wait? I mean, obviously if they had waited till December of last year, that would have been better than 2015, right? So I don't know. It's something tells me Square's starting to learn its lesson with this. I don't plan on hearing any information for at least till late next year, personally. But that's kind of my.
Going back to the way Bethesda does their game announcements, it was the same exact thing what you were talking about, Eric, with Fallout 4. They did the same thing with Skyrim. I think at E3 2011, they announced the game. We had not heard anything about the next Elder Scrolls game before that. It was all in the dark. And then Elder Scrolls 5 is coming out this November, literally a few months from now. And it's oh man, it's so soon. And it's you get excited because it's right there. I'm going to have it real soon. And it's real easy to kind of jump on the hype train, so to speak, because it's right around the corner almost. Versus the way that Square has been doing it for a long time, where they just announce something and there's no end in sight to that. And then you get a situation like Versus 13, where they know people are hungry for it, and I'm sure the developers are eager to show off what they have been working on. And then you get an E3, was it 2010 or 2011? I think it was 2011, where they showed off a bunch of Versus footage, fights in Insomnia against behemoths during the invasion of Insomnia, and some more footage out in the wilderness and stuff like that. And they showed off a little bit of how the combat worked. And of course, none of that, not one bit of that, made it into the game in the eventual Final Fantasy 15. And then you get a huge group of people who are like, what happened to the concepts of Versus 13? I wanted that. I wanted what you showed back then. That's the game I wanted to play. And this is an entirely different product now, with a different director, a different vision, a different everything. So it is, in my opinion, never, ever a good thing, especially for video games, which I think you have to be super fluid, you have to be super flexible as a creator in terms of what your vision is when you set out, and then the roadblocks you will find yourself in, and the technical limitations, and then you have to scale back here or change this or that. And the thing changes enormously from beginning to end. The one thing I've learned from doing these Final Fantasy reviews on the channel, as I've looked into the development history and researching how the games were made, is that in almost every case, the game was originally this thing and became something completely different by the end. Final Fantasy VII was going to be a detective story in New York City. That was the original idea.
What if
we got instead?
What if they announced that detective story and people
I
got
know.
all hyped about it? That's what it would have been, you know?
Yeah, and then
But
they
they're
release.
supposed to have Xenogears like graphics also.
Yeah, where it was going to be
3D
like
environment.
I can't remember. I can't remember if that was the case, but all I know is that it was originally supposed to be that detective story in New York City, and it turned into something completely different. And it's similar with Chrono Trigger. Like Chrono Trigger's development like changed dramatically over the course. What it was originally going to be with Sakaguchi and Toriyama and who's the other guy? Gosh dang it! The you should know this, Phil Hart. You're a big Dragon Quest fan.
Oh, Yuji Horii?
Yuji Horii. So the three of them, who were actually, I'm getting the name of the artist wrong too.
Kira Toriyama.
Toriyama, I did get his name right. Okay. So the three of them came up with an idea on a plane as they were going to California to learn about 3D graphics development. And that idea is not the same idea as what Chrono Trigger ended up being. Not even close. I mean, that's just how it goes in game development. You start with one idea. Most of the time, that's not necessarily what you end up with. And so the best idea is to announce it when the thing is near completion. And it's like, this is it. We've worked on this for years. The idea is solid. We've gotten it to work. And here's the game. Here's the announcement. Comes out in 3 months. Get excited. Like, I just don't see the benefit ever in announcing 5 years, 10 years, or even just a couple of years before the game comes out, when a lot of the stuff you're showing is not going to be in the final game.
I think the rule should be don't ever announce your game or show off your game and when the development itself is in pre-alpha stage. Yeah. I think it's okay to show it when you're in alpha stage and just put, this is alpha footage here. It is subject to change. Because when you're in the alpha stage, you have everything set up. You got the core concept down. You got the assets done. You essentially have the game at a near completed state. And then when you get into the a beta of it is when you're testing all the bugs and everything like that. And then alpha is making sure all the mechanics work the way they're supposed to and stuff like that. I think it's okay to announce it around there if you want to announce it a year ahead and stuff. That's fine, but if you're only have the game written on paper or only have a CG cutscene for it to show, that's I feel like that's just putting yourself in a corner. That's when you do that, and then okay, guys, we're announced the Final Fantasy 7 Remake. Now, how are we going to do this?
Well, and honestly, if they had just waited, though, too, a lot of the things that have been controversial could have been in their benefit. So, for example, if they had waited to announce the Final Fantasy 7 Remake until whatever date, and on the first trailer it said Episode 1, people might have actually gotten hyped, oh man, we're getting multiple Final Fantasy 7 games. This is awesome. But the fact that they announced it it was just a full remake in 2015, that's what everyone assumed. And then later they had to come out and be well, no, that's now we've thought about it, it's going to be episodic. It's just when you're whenever you're doing, if you're changing it, people are just going to get upset. But if you come out the gates hot, this is what it is, and we're and just sell it, it's going to be a lot more, the reception's going to be a lot better for you,
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good point, is when they announce it, there's a certain expectation put in people's heads immediately just by what the announcement is. That announcement was fairly vague. It was just a lot of pre-rendered, really excellent CG renderings of the city itself and then the back of Cloud's head, basically. So it's oh my gosh, we're getting a full remake of Final Fantasy VII. That's the thought. Right. And then later you announce something else. Oh, that's not what I thought. I thought it was just going to be the whole game in one. What? But like you're saying, if you're close to the end of development, you can come right out and be Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 1. That is announced with the announcement of the game. And all of a sudden, I think the expectations change immediately, and it's not quite as hard to swallow.
Well, especially because this is the first time you're hearing about a Final Fantasy VII Remake, right? So you're naturally going to be excited anyways. So the fact that it's episodic wouldn't be as big of an issue. So
that's another thing too, is they're not even being cut and clear with us on how the episodic structure format works. Is it going to be is it going to be the full Final Fantasy VII, just cut into different episodes? Is it going to give us the story of FF7 episode 1 or 2? I mean, likely it's going to be FF7 itself being cut into pieces, but and rewritten to be like full games each one. But it's so vague how they explain it. It makes me question if they know how they're going to like separate it. It's like when you have an announcement like this, people are going to have questions. People are going to mob you and want every little detail from you they possibly can. And to simply give that and not be able to answer questions about the remake beyond just like very vague statements of it, I mean, how do you expect the people to react to it? They're going to react negatively, of course. Like, I feel like they didn't think ahead of time, like the repercussions of announcing something so early.
Not to mention too, when you are continuously changing, or what appears to the fan base to be changing what you originally stated, you're naturally going to have people say, okay, well, now I'm not going to pre-order it. Now I'm not going to buy it on day one. I will purchase it, but I'm just going to wait to see how it, see the reception. Whereas if you can just, like I said, sell an initial idea, come through with it in full, I think a lot more people are going to be willing to buy it on day one. So, and that's what they want, right? So.
Yeah, absolutely. They want pre-orders. Because for a long time, the model in the industry has been pre-order money helps fund development too. So it's like, I can't remember which game it was that didn't have like as strong pre-order sales as they were hoping for. So they were like debating whether they had to delay the game. Like it's just ridiculous how much they rely on pre-order sales these days. But
yeah.
In any case, we're not going to get any information on it this year. It's probably going to be a long time. Earliest I would think again would be next year. I believe Kingdom Hearts 3 is slated to release at the end of next year. They haven't said exactly when, but that's probably what's going to be holiday of 2018. So with Nomura directing both games, I would assume Kingdom Hearts 3 is probably going to come first, and the Final Fantasy VII Remake will probably come after that, probably in the following year. So I would expect the way that Square-Enix does things, that there will be something at E3 this year. If there is nothing at E3 this year, holy crap, people are going to be way pissed, first of all. But along those lines, if it is, let's say it is coming out in 2019 instead, and depending on everything that we've said right now about how we prefer companies to handle releases and giving information, would you rather, if it's coming out in 2019, that they do a full unveiling of the game in 2019, a few months before the game comes out? Or at this point, since we've been in the darks for so long, is it better that we have information a year ahead of time?
I think the best way to handle this would be if they need till 2019 to finish the game, take your time. I'm fine with that. But you don't have to keep us in the dark either. You can say, hey, like we initially planned to have an announcement here, but we've listened to you all and we don't want to keep announcing these things so early. So we're going to solidify some things. Sorry. If they just said something like that, people are still going to be upset, but it wouldn't be as bad as if, people expect it and it doesn't happen, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be putting my foot in my own mouth if I said, give me info now. But it's, I think more of my main issue was that they came out of the gate with no info to begin with. I'd rather they make sure they have all their ducks in a row and they're like 100% certain this is the product that you are going to get. This is the information we have here. This is everything you need to know about the game. So, yeah, hypothetically, if it came out in 2019, the cynical side of me is saying 2020, but say 2019, I'd rather they announce an E3 or Tokyo Game Show, whichever one they feel compelled to do, and just throw everything out there and what it's going to be, and then release it like in the winter. I'd rather not get like information now, especially since they just took the game back from CyberConnect, and I'm very sure they're restructuring everything to work with their in-house development team. So I'm very sure what they'll give right now is probably still going to be very vague. I've known Square-Enix for a long time now, and I know they are very vague and very bad at communication. Well, except FF14, but and I know any answer they're going to give is just going to cause more controversy. So I say just keep it quiet and just announce it when you have like a lot to give.
Yeah. Yeah, there's part of me that agrees with that, and if it comes down to if there's still a lot of room to change, like they're still in a state right now where they're testing to see what works and what doesn't, and there's still a lot of ideas that could end up being axed, then don't say anything. Don't say anything at all, because it will bite you the way that it did in FF15. But because they have announced so early, and because the excitement for the game dips with time, I feel like due to that situation, of course, my preferred situation is that none of us know that there is a Final Fantasy VII Remake happening right now. Or none of us, that's not been announced. We don't know until the year it's released and they bust it out. That's what I prefer. But since they've done it this terrible, stupid way of doing it, I think it's really important, like Hat was saying, that you just be transparent. And you just, or was it you, Velard, they're saying? I can't remember.
That was Hat.
So be transparent about where you're at. You don't have to say anything huge. Just be regular and be consistent about it. And say, this is where we're at. This is kind of what we're planning on right now. We can't wait to show it to you, but we just want to make sure that we're not, that we've got our ducks in a row before we say anything. But this is kind of what's going on. Like, or kind of like Tabata did with FF15's development. He was very consistent about being in touch with the audience, with the players. And I think, again, that was a smart move on his behalf because of how long that game had been in development and that people were starting to really, really doubt if it would ever be released or if it would be any good. And he built a lot of faith, I think, in doing that. And so I think if they want faith to be built in this game, they need to do something kind of similar. And but, of course, don't actually show or say anything about what set in stone the game's going to be like till you know that that's going to be the case.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Especially in the situation they're in, is like you don't absolutely need to tell everyone exactly what you're doing with it, but you can throw out ideas, screenshots, like this is what we meant when we said episodic, stuff like that. I mean, if this is in the situation that they're in right now, I can agree that's another way to approach it.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Well, and
so
okay, yeah, I was going to say, just to finish that off there. In addition to the fact that at this point, people are already expecting it, right? So if you don't have that communication in place, people are, when they get the game, they're going to be like, oh, I waited 4 years or 5 years for this game.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if they had just waited till 2019, it wouldn't be as bad. But so their only solution right now is just to like give us some transparency with actually what's going on. So I don't know. Who knows if they'll do it, but
we'll see. But anyways, Square Enix, if you watch this podcast, I know that you know of my channel. I know that you are aware of my channel. You have told me so. If you're watching this, people are getting, and I'm sure you know it already, people are starting to really feel anxious, and they're doubting your ability to do anything right.
Square Enix
to build some confidence.
Square Enix, if you're watching this, you know who I am now, and I'm sorry for a lot of the mean things I say. Not really, but
Square's just like, what? Really? People are upset?
I like you, Yoshida. Thank you.
Yoshida's a beast.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's move on to topic number 2. Demon Souls online servers are being shut down. Sony Japan has announced that those are going to be going down in late February 28th, I believe it is. And so if any of you were really into Demon Souls, you've only got a little bit longer where you can do PvP or cooperative, online play. All that stuff's going out. Whether or not this is signaling that there could perhaps be some kind of PS4 remaster where they bring the game back on PS4 and open a different server or whatever is speculation at this point. There's no solid leads as to whether or not that's true. But despite that, what I wanted to use this as an opportunity to talk about is the longevity of games that have an online component as such, like a part of its identity. Games like Demon Souls were meant to be playing with online functionality. Like, the intention of the developer was that you'd be going through this very dangerous world that was very much like an innovative sort of like view on how to make action RPGs that has greatly influenced the way that they are made at this point. And the idea of it was that despite going through this incredibly dangerous environment in PoE, you could at any time be attacked by another player, which is a really kind of a stressful, scary thought. I'm going to lose my progress because someone really good, who I can't read their patterns and learn how exactly they operate, is going to come in and kill me. Like the tension, I guess, or the stress, or the excitement even for some people that creates of the unknown is not going to be a part of the game anymore. That whole element is yanked out. And how much does that change the core experience of Demon's Souls? And what does that mean for online games as a whole? I mean, especially MMOs like Final Fantasy XI and Final Fantasy XIV. Eric here is a huge fan of Final Fantasy XIV. Would you say one of your favorite games of all time?
I would say it's my favorite MMO of all time, and I would say it's the best Final Fantasy of this modern generation.
So the thought that that game at some point in the future is unplayable, I mean, like, what do you think of that? I mean, I sometimes, think about, like, when I'm old, man, like I'm in my 70s and 80s and my life is coming to a close, like, I'm probably going to go back and fire up Final Fantasy VII again, for one last hurrah kind of a thing. And the fact that basically won't be possible for games like Final Fantasy XIV or Final Fantasy XI, like, what do you think about that, about preserving those experiences? You know what I mean?
I've always admitted that despite the quality of 11 and 14, I believe meeting the quality standards of a Final Fantasy main title, the biggest flaw to it is that one day these servers will shut down. Mm-hmm. And granted, Square Enix is doing things with 11 right now, because 11 is, it's up. You can still play it today, play everything on it, but it is at its lowest point because it's a very old game. What Square Enix has been trying to do is trying to ways to revitalize the title by Final Fantasy XI Grandmasters. That's only in Japan right now. They're releasing the mobile version of 11, which is like a reboot of it for mobile devices. And they're trying to find ways to keep it alive, but eventually, like, no matter like how much you try to revitalize it, there's going to be a day that they're not up. And it is sad to think that, but that's just kind of how it is. Maybe some freak chance Square Enix will just always be around even after I'm gone, and and they'll still keep those games up. But the fact of the matter is that the population for them will greatly die out. It's something I kind of had to face with Phantasy Star Online when, those got officially shut down before, fans brought them back up. But it's, you're right. That's the biggest flaw to it. And for Demon's Souls, I have nostalgia for that also. I loved that game when it first came out. It is sad to see the online features of it go down, but you can play it just as fine without people. I think it's just icing on top of the cake with people around, but you don't need it to get the rich experience from it. And on your earlier statement, I think it's inevitable an HD remaster's coming out. I have a feeling it's going to get announced like right after this gets shut down.
Yeah, I think, just like y'all have been saying, it's just the nature of that specific industry. If it's an online game and it relies on monthly subscriptions, there's only so long that can go. But I think, like Eric was saying, the key to it is just making a game that is still fun to play single player, right? And I think Final Fantasy XIV in particular, Demon's Souls as well, they really found that balance where the online component adds to it, but it's still fun. It would still be fun to play without that, right? And I think if games want to have longevity like that, I think they really need to focus on that. Like, if they made another Final Fantasy online game, that's what I'd want. More of a single-player experience, but there is online components to it that enhance it, but it would still be fun to play as a single player, right? So that way, I don't know, players can actually go back and enjoy it, because it is sad when you have so much time invested in a game and then you realize, like, in the future, possibly in the very near future, it's going to cease to exist. I mean, it's depressing, you know. So
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with what you guys are saying. I mean, my first experience with Demon Souls, I didn't even have the capability of getting my PS3 onto the internet, so I was just playing offline PoE or PvE. I mean, I should say. So, like, definitely for me, like a player like me who doesn't typically like multiplayer games, anyways, we'll be able to enjoy the game for what it was. But I do think that for many, many people, a lot of people that I follow on YouTube, like they're all about the PvP in the Souls games. It's like what they get it for. They get Dark Souls, they get Demon Souls, they get Bloodborne, whatever, to play versus other people. And so for them, that's gone. Now, whether or not they're just going to re-release the game, Eric feels like it's an inevitability. I think it's probably pretty likely, given the way the industry has been over the last probably 5 or 6 years.
if there's money to be made, they will do it.
They will do it. They'll bring it to the PS4 and you'll be able to keep playing it. But how many times are they going to do that? Again, with things like Kingdom Hearts, they'll do it on the PS3 and then they'll do it again on the PS4 and then who knows, they'll do it again. It was the same thing with even The Last of Us, which was like a very late cycle PS3 game. They brought it almost in the beginning of the PS4 cycle over the PS4. So when there's money to be made in it, which I think has been soundly proven at this point, they'll probably just keep releasing things on the next system. But not everything. Not every game will get that treatment. The ones that were maybe mid-level hits or that were a little bit less successful than the company wanted them to be, you're not going to see those games get brought over. And if they have an online component that's such a central part of the experience, it's like you're going to lose that. I mean, at some point, yeah, like you're not gonna, if it's the multiplayer game, if that's like the center of what the game's about, is playing online with other people, you can't expect them to keep those servers up forever when the interest drops off inevitably over time. Like, that's just kind of the nature of online games. But I really wish in the case of the Final Fantasy MMOs that they would have an offline experience that went with it. An offline single-player version of the game that you could play.
I agree.
So that you wouldn't lose them completely.
They kind of did that with Final Fantasy Grandmasters. Now, it's like the Final Fantasy free-to-play games that you've seen on there, but from what I heard and what I've seen the videos of it, because, again, it never came here to America, but it'd be nice if they did, is that they have recap of events and storyline, or the storyline of, I think they probably upped the Rise of the Alert or something right now, I would imagine, and in that expansion. But they are trying to give you the story in that form. I think that's Square-Enix's plan for the long run of it. Like, after, say, like 14, starts losing its population and shutting down, they're going to probably try to release some new form of 14 to give you at least the story experience to it.
Sure.
But the thing is, still the problem with that is you're not going to get the deep, rich experience that you got from the original game. I feel like this is just like a Band-Aid for that. That's what I feel like Grandmasters is a Band-Aid.
This actually reminds me of Mass Effect 3 a little bit. I know that when the game was released, you had to play the online portion in order to, like, it's been so friggin' long since I played it. And the game's so, in many ways, like, just not memorable for me. But playing the online component of the game helped you to, like, gain 100% something or other. Like, you could do a lot of it in terms of, like because it's the war with the Reapers, right? So you're capturing certain systems, or there was something to do with that. But you couldn't complete it just by playing the single player. You had to also play the multiplayer in order to, like, get 100% on whatever that component of the game was. I can't remember. It's been forever. It just came to me. Sorry, I would have looked it up if I had thought about this beforehand. In any case, like, with that game's servers, I don't even know if you can still play online in Mass Effect 3. Maybe you can, but eventually it'll go away. Now the single player experience that you sit down and play, Someone is going to have to come into the comments and comment on this for me. But I believe from memory that you couldn't get like the 100% ending, like the real ending or the best ending or whatever, unless you had completed a certain percentage of this sort of like thing. And the only way to do that, at least originally, maybe they patched that later, was that you had to play online. So now that game, is that broken forever? Like you can never actually unlock an ending in the game because the online component's gone away? Maybe that's a bad example, but it's just being used as an example that I think developers need to be careful in terms of longevity and preserving an experience to make sure that the two things can be done separately.
I wonder if developers even care. I wonder if they're just more like, okay, we're in the now. People aren't going to play this in the future. They're going to play the next best thing. Maybe they just think of the masses and not necessarily people like us who like to preserve gaming. Like me, that has, I have like nearly 40 years worth of stuff on my wall over here.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think they really take people like me into account when they make stuff like this. And I think Square Enix is a different story because they love to preserve their franchise for better or worse. But I think for people like EA or who make the online feature, like other AAA companies, they kind of like think to themselves like, hey, it's, let's just do all the cool online features right now and let's not care about how it happens in the future. Most people are not going to play this anyways in the future. So yeah, it's like, why bother?
That's probably the typical mindset.
Yeah, I mean, as I said before, if there's money to be made, it will be made. So I think like Eric said, they're not really, I don't think often concerned with longevity. I think it's getting better now, but I think in the past they weren't really concerned about that. Let's just see how much we can make in the short term. But I mean, I do agree that I think games need to move closer to just really solidifying that single player experience, because I don't know. I mean, me personally, I'm not a huge online game fan. Like I played Final Fantasy 14, loved it, but after a couple of weeks, I'm ready to move on. So it takes a very specific type of player. So as they can start looking more towards the long term, that would be fantastic.
I mean, if we're using Final Fantasy as examples, what about the new online mode that came out for 15? From what I hear, it has relevant story bits to it. I haven't played it myself yet, but from what I hear, it has relevant story points that like happen between. I'm not going to spoil anything, but which happened during a period of the game, and there's going to be a day where those shut down. I'm like, what are they going to do then to give you that part of the story?
Mm-hmm. Very good question.
Yeah, I don't know. I think they're just trying to keep their hands in every little pot so they can seem cutting edge. We're gonna have the online component. We're gonna have the DLC. We're gonna have, the movie. We're gonna have the mobile version. We're gonna have the super high quality Windows version, PC version. They want to do a little bit of everything. So, yeah, I think.
Well, let us know what you guys think in the comments about multiplayer games, online games, their longevity, preserving the experience for me to go back and try it again when I'm 90 years old, because that means something to me. I'm serious, man. I'm going to go back and play all the Final Fantasy games when I'm like freaking 90 years old. I'm going to do it. So,
are you going to live stream it?
I probably will. I will probably still be freaking like making reviews and stuff when I'm an old man, for anyone who's still watching at that point.
Anyway. The game Final Fantasy VII is getting a little tiring on the 85th playthrough. I don't know. It's not really living up to the hype now. So
I gotta get Link to the Past like twice a year.
Exactly. Okay. Topic number 3 here. Xenoblade 2 is releasing this week. What are some of our predictions for the game, and what do we want to see? I want to kind of set this up a little bit by saying that when the original Xenoblade Chronicles released in Japan, Nintendo didn't have any plans to bring that or to localize it outside of Japan at all. And I remember there was a movement, it actually is still a website now, but it was called Operation Rainfall. Their entire thing was, we want to petition Nintendo to bring Xenoblade Chronicles, The Last Story, and Pandora's Tower to Western territories. I was all in on that. I called Nintendo every day. I mailed them once a week. I emailed them a couple of times a day for a number of months. I don't remember how long it was. It was
So did
pretty
I.
close to a year. No, were you involved in that too? Nice.
I was heavily involved in Operation Rainfall. I really
Nice.
wanted Xenoblade.
Yeah. So I think it's important to start here with this because it shows how dedicated I was to the original game and how badly I wanted it, how unique it felt in its in the trailers and marketing material that they put out, and it kind of also shows a little bit of what the RPG landscape was like at the time. It was a bit barren in terms of like really strong, solid RPGs with like great storytelling in them, and I could tell Xenoblade Chronicles was the kind of game I had been wanting for a long time and that no one was giving to me. And so, yeah, I was, like I said, I was calling Nintendo every day. I started to get the same people on the phone, and they started to know who I was. I'm like, okay, we've put in your petition or whatever. Like, we know, like, stop calling us. But that was the point. The point was to annoy the fetch out of them because the idea was like, listen, this is not freaking acceptable. Like, we have to have this. And
We're
then
trying
they
to give
announced-
you money. We're trying to give you money.
and
Take
then
it.
they announced that well, I guess Nintendo of Europe decided to take the risk, and they announced that they were going to localize it in Europe, and then we were still left out to dry in the U.S. and North America, so we were freaking out even more. So they were kind enough to just give us the same version that was already being done in Europe. But I'm just kind of glad of that. I loved those British actors. But in any case, I was very passionate and am very passionate. I loved that game. I enjoyed even Xenoblade Chronicles X. I know a lot of people didn't like that game. I still liked it. I didn't think it was a classic game or anything like the original Xenoblade is. But it was still good. And so I love the series, is what I'm trying to say. This game has snuck up on me in a big way. It was like I was writing down, what should I talk about in today's podcast? And it was like, Xenoblade 2 is coming out on Friday. Oh. Holy crap, that's that's a couple days away.
Yeah, we're talking about this
And-
Friday. Yeah.
And it reflects a little bit about what my feelings for the game have been since it's been announced. Now, I've had conversations about this with people in the comment section and stuff. I've talked about how I don't like the new art style. I'm not super impressed by what I see from the voice acting or the storytelling. I feel like it's trending towards a lot of anime tropes, and it's getting away from what made the original unique in the first place and what drew me to it and made me so passionate and made me demand that Nintendo bring it over here. I feel like this iteration of it has lost those points that made it unique. So a lot of people are asking me, well, what would it take for you to enjoy Xenoblade 2, I guess? Like, what do you want to see from it? What is it? What would to you would make it a good game? So I wanted to talk a little bit about that, about what I predict that it will be, and then what I would like to see from it, given even what we already know. So I don't know if you guys saw this today. I don't know if it was released today or not, but I saw that Nintendo released on their own YouTube channel a music video for a song from the soundtrack. The song is called Shadow of the Lowlands. So I'll put it up on the screen here real quick just so you can see. Not you guys, but the audience. Xenoblade Chronicles 2 Shadow of the Lowlands music video, Nintendo Switch. And this is on Nintendo's channel. It's really strange. Did you guys see it today?
I saw
No.
it in the thing, but I was going to check it out later tonight.
You guys should watch it, maybe just real quick if you can, just to get an idea of like what's in there. The piece is performed by a group from the Netherlands, I think, a choral group called Anuna. I don't know how to pronounce it because there's a little what do you call it? Little mark above the letter U. Anuna or something like that. Anyways, a choral group. I looked into them a little bit. They they kind of dress like this all the time. So what you see in the video is not like a Xenoblade theme in terms of what they're wearing.
Oh,
So all the
Xenoblade
yeah, all
2.
what's that?
Like, oh yeah, I'm watching it right now. It's like, dude, this is like with actual people.
Yeah, yeah. It's literally the group. Anuna, dressed as they usually are, just sort of singing this music, composed by, of course, Yasunori Mitsuda. So the men wear these dark gray vests and slacks, and then a white shirt underneath, and the women wear all these black dresses. And so it's literally just them standing in a field, a foggy field, singing this music.
I'm watching it right now, and this just seems odd.
It's a little bizarre, isn't it?
Yeah.
Nintendo's really banking on this game being good, isn't it?
Like
everything's showing.
It's a little bizarre, and the reason it's bizarre, okay, is because the tone of this video is so different from the tone of all of the trailers for Xenoblade 2 that we've seen so far. Xenoblade 2's character design and the bright, colorful nature of it, and the music that they've used in the trailers and the dialogue that they've highlighted sort of gives this more of an upbeat kind of feel. It's not a dark game. It's not a game with heavy themes, I would think.
Yeah, I'm sitting here watching this now, and there's like this deep fog rolling in. Everyone's wearing black. It's just very grim looking, you know.
It's very depressing. Then you watch like an actual Xenoblade 2 trailer. It's like all colorful and anime characters.
Yeah. This looks like a Alice in Chains video or something.
They're so opposite in tone between this and that. But this is a piece of music from the game. And so I'm sitting here thinking to myself, okay, if the game contains some heavier themes in it, if it has some real like contrast in maybe the image of what it's showing on the surface and then what the game ends up having. I'm not saying I want it to be a dark game or I want it to be like super graphic or have, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that if they can come from this place in tone and dip a little bit into some strong contrasting themes and create some genuine emotion in me, I'm going to love the game. Because that is kind of what I look for in stories that I enjoy. I want something that can move me. I want something that can give me some insight, can make me think on a little bit deeper level. And that's what the Xeno series was all about before they moved to Nintendo, before Xenoblade Chronicles. Although Xenoblade Chronicles contained some elements of that, as a whole it was a lot lighter than Xenogears or Xenosaga. And the reason why Xenogears touched me so much is because it jumped into some stuff that made you think. It made you feel. It made you go like, whoa, like, hold on a second and back up. Like, let me process this. That element of the Xeno series was lost a little bit, well, a lot of it, but not completely with Xenoblade Chronicles. Now, Xenoblade Chronicles is great for many other reasons, but it at least had some of that still in there. You could still see the influence of the Xeno series beforehand having some level of influence on the game. And I feel like what I've seen, even in X, they had that too, by the way, even more so than Xenoblade Chronicles. But Xenoblade 2, to me, appears to have abandoned that. And I think that's what's been at the back of my mind that's been bothering me about it, even though I didn't really think about it that way. Like, I couldn't really like piece together what it was about it that wasn't sitting right. And I think that's what it is that it doesn't appear from anything I've seen of Xenoblade 2 to contain some of those heavier themes, some of those more introspective themes and an atmosphere that I really, really liked about Xenogears. So if it has some of that, and this little music video here, at least to some degree, hints that there could be something like that there, that's going to, first of all, surprise me because I'm not expecting it from the game. My prediction is that will not be there. But if it is, that can go a long way towards changing my mind and my heart about what I feel for Xenoblade 2.
Oh, I mean, if you want my predictions on it, like I said, I was a heavier contributor to Operation Rainfall myself. I sent emails every other day to Nintendo. You know, I basically at the point to start a copy and pasting what I said and send it to them. I have owned the European copy, the North American copy, and the 3DS version of the game, and I played it 3 separate times with it. I will say the first Xenoblade, I would go as far to say in the 360 PS3 Wii era, that was by far the best JRPG to come out of it, especially in a time where JRPGs were very much lacking at the time. I think it was actually around that time where I started becoming a little more cynical of them.
Yeah.
And it was a fantastic game. Now, when Xenoblade X came out, sorry, I'm kind of the opposite of what you think, and I thought it was pretty bad. Gameplay wise, it was okay, but it was kind of my saying that I say a lot on Discord and when I talk to people is that I feel like JRPGs don't know very well how to deal with open world yet in games.
Sure.
But anyways, I watched Xenoblade 2, and I kind of look at it, and I'm in the same way. I'm kind of off put by the very anime presentation that it gives. But as I've told people, as long as like it's executed very well and it has like a story quality that matches the quality of the first Xenoblade, I'm definitely willing to overlook the anime aspect of it. I'm very disappointed that didn't use an art style that was that made the first Xenoblade so unique. I don't know if it was just like their attempt to reach the Japanese audience more with this type of style.
Sure.
I mean, it could have been. But if I had to predict this game, I think it's definitely going to be better than X. But I have a feeling it may not hit me in the same way the first Xenoblade did, just based solely off the trailers I watched. I could be completely wrong. This one might blow the first two out of the water, but so far I haven't seen much to make me think otherwise. I'm not a fan of how young the main character is, but you never know how he looks, and may fit the theme of his character better than if he was like older. So I'm go in this with 100% open mind. I'm not going to immediately try to find reasons to not like it. I'm going to find more reasons to like it, and I have a feeling I'm going to have a good time with it.
Yeah, I'm a little bit different than you all, because I've actually never played the first one, and I know it's a great RPG. I plan to correct that soon. So for me,
by Friday, bro.
Yeah, it's probably not going to happen.
2 days to get a 50-hour RPG.
Yeah, I got some stuff I got to take care of before that. But as like a new player coming in, there's been a lot of buzz about this game, a lot of interest. We were talking about it on one of our podcast episodes, and I kind of really dove into it, watched some gameplay videos, watched some trailers, and researched it a little bit. And honestly, one of the things I hate about JRPGs, and I love JRPGs, but one of the things I hate is when they have main characters that look like children. And this game seems all about that. And I'm not digging that at all. But I'm still am kind of excited, because from the gameplay that I've seen, it looks like a very interesting world to run around in. I just question their target audience. When you have a main character that looks like he's 8, But I think it's one of those things where I will get over it as I play longer. So I don't know. I mean, it's gonna have great music. We know that. The art style I'm not a big fan of, and it looks like it's. On the JRPG meter, it seems like it's an 11 out of 10. So, who knows?
The more I'm worried about is there is the main character, I believe his name is Rex, and then the female protagonist, which is Pyra. Mm-hmm. And what I'm more worried about is how they're going to establish their relationship. I don't know if they're going to go with like they're going to fall in love thing, or they're going to go with the kind of like brother sister type thing. But the thing is, they character wise, they feel disproportionate with each other. As in, she comes off like as someone who looks much older than him. So if they're going to try to go with like a romance type thing or something like that, it's going to feel very disjarring because his character is just so young looking.
It's like the inverse of Snow and
That's what I was
Sarah
thinking.
from Final
Yeah.
Fantasy 13.
Pyro does seem more mature. So yeah, if they go that route, it's definitely going to be awkward. I mean, I think I'm kind of with Mike in that if it's a good story, it's a good story, and I'll enjoy it regardless for that reason. But I am glad that so many people have told me like, hey, the first one is downright amazing. So I know as a new player going in, like, hey, if they kind of crap the bed with this one, I can always go back to that first one. So
yeah, I don't have the highest hopes that this is going to be like a masterpiece level game. I'm not predicting that it's going to be bad. I think that it's going to be an average 7 to 8 out of 10 kind of game, somewhere in that range. But I feel like from what I've seen of the voice acting and the writing and just sort of like style of exposition and dialogue and storytelling, it's not going to hit me. It's not going to be something that's going to move me. I'm not going to be like terribly into it. And if the game doesn't grab me from a narrative sense right away, then it's going to come all down to, am I going to be into the long haul, the grind, the fighting, the combat? And I don't know. Like, from what I've seen so far, it's real different. They've changed a lot there. And so, I mean, that's nice that it's fresh and that it's new, but I'm not necessarily thrilled about what they're doing with the idea of blades either. It seems a little bit weird to me.
yeah.
So I don't have, again, and I hope people know this by now, I try my very best not to let expectations affect basically like my mindset when I'm playing it. I try to wipe that out and just like see it for what it is. And even when I don't like something initially, I try to talk about it with other people first and get lots of different perspective on something before I go ahead and say like, yeah, I don't like this or this is bad or something like that. So I'm going to play it and I'm going to talk about it a lot on the channel. So there's going to be plenty of moments where I can have my mind changed. I just don't expect that this game is going to hit the tone and that it's going to that I like in storytelling, and that it's going to trend way too far into anime tropes.
I think
it's going to be predictable.
Yeah, I think the combat looks fantastic. Just
I was going to say
just
that.
what worries me is that it may. I mean, every JRPG makes me worry about this, but it's probably not the case. Is that they'll probably try to be too complex for its own good. But it looks simple enough. The UI looks a little cluttered. It looks like
There's
a lot.
a lot.
Going on.
There's a lot going on the screen.
But it might not be so bad once you understand what everything is and the point of it. As long as there's a good reason for it being there, then I'm fine with it.
I just hope that they'll have an option. I know that there are options in certain games, like The Witcher 3 actually has an option to make to size up or down the UI, so you can make it like smaller or bigger. I know the reason why the UI is so large. It's because it's a handheld title as well. So when you're looking at it in your hands, you need to be able to read what that stuff says. So they've got to make it a little bit bigger so that when it gets shrunk down on the small screen, you can read it. But I hope that when you're playing it on a TV, you at least have an option somewhere to shrink or maybe even possibly remove the UI in some way. So that it's not just getting in the way. You can't even see your character because there's all this stuff in front of it. Especially with such a beautiful world, right? Now, I know a lot of that UI pops up in battles, and it's not necessarily in the way when you're running around in the landscapes, because that would really be a shame to have such beautiful environments that are covered up by health meters and all kinds of other stuff. But
yeah, I mean, looking at everything that I've seen, it looks like a beautiful world. Like you said, it looks like it's going to be a lot of fun to run around in. But I'm telling you, man, I'm going to put this like game in the same boat as some other JRPGs. Like it's Final Fantasy 10-2. This is like one of those games I think that I'm going to have to like play when I know, like, I make sure like nobody else is around. Because like there's going to be too much explanation if they're not familiar with JRPGs. I'm like, no, like it's not. It's for everyone. It's not for kids. But
Yeah,
it's
I don't expect it to be as bad as 10-2 is. Like,
I wasn't trying to say that.
Yeah, I know. But if my dad were to walk in while I'm playing Final Fantasy X-2, that's a very different conversation than.
I tell you, when I was younger, my parents just always found a way to just walk in right when the awkward scenes happen. Where it's Final Fantasy X was Didas and Yuna's lap. They come in and want to say something, or if there's some like implied sexual scene or something like that, I'm like, oh god, why now?
The required minigame, Yuna giving LeBlanc a massage, and it's just like this sounds like a porno. Like this is just so odd.
This is a compelling RPG with a rich story. Yes, I have to massage it back.
Yeah, so maybe putting it in the 10-2 boat, maybe that was a little extreme, but I think you guys know what I mean.
But I know what you mean, though, is that it's leaning more that way, where it's like, you have somebody come over who isn't familiar with the fact that JRPGs tend to have this kind of thing in them, but that's not what you're playing it for. If someone's not aware of that,
if somebody comes over to my apartment, I'm not going to boot this game up to go. I'm probably going to put on like Horizon Zero Dawn or something like, but I don't think that's what they intended, I guess. So I
don't really look at Xenoblade 2 as much of a guilty pleasure game. I can think of some on top of my mind that are, but for Xenoblade 2, I don't think it is, just because I think a lot of the people I know are familiar with anime tropes. So
the first game
has a questionable design.
Yeah, from what I've seen from the first game, that wouldn't it's not the same case, at least for me. The main character seems a bit older. It seems like it deals with a little bit more mature themes from what I've seen. But so I don't know. I'll buy it. I'll play it. I'll talk about it. It's probably a great game.
We will find out this week. So
I'm gonna play it thoroughly this weekend. So you can ask me on Discord.
We'll have a lot to discuss on Discord and on next week's podcast.
Yeah.
Stay tuned. But anyways, for those of you who have been wondering, like, why aren't you talking about Xenoblade more? Like, that's the reason why. Like, anytime I bring it up, it's just going to upset you. Because I don't have that much confidence that it will be a great game. Not that it will be a bad game, but that it won't be great like the original one was. I don't have a lot of confidence in that from what I've seen. So that's the reason why. But we will be talking about it more in the near future because it's coming out on Friday. So
let's see if they prove us wrong.
I hope they do. I genuinely hope they do.
Hopefully you all have a great weekend.
Yes, with Xenoblade 2. Okay, let's get into our viewer-suggested topics now. First one from BNK Militant. If Square remade Final Fantasy VI, would you rather see a remake similar to the Secret of Mana remake or the Final Fantasy VII remake? What do you guys think about that?
More akin to the Secret of Mana remake, or more like the Final Fantasy IV PSP version remake?
I'm sorry, it's for Final Fantasy VI, right?
Yeah, 6.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard for me to pick either one because I love the pixel art in that game so much. Mm-hmm. I think it's just perfect in every way. But if I had to choose, I would definitely go with more of the Secret of Mana route than the Final Fantasy VII remake. And that's just because I haven't played the Final Fantasy VII remake. I mean, if you're just looking at specifically art style, I don't know. I feel like a lot of the humor is going to be lost if it looked that realistic.
Yeah. It's actually a big concern with FF7 itself. I'm doing a playthrough of it. I'm doing live streams of it every Friday over on Game Tyrant. Those of you who are not aware of that, Game Tyrant's Twitch channel, so twitch.tv/Game Tyrant. I'll put a link in the description if I can remember. But the point is that I'm playing through Final Fantasy VII right now. And there's a lot of silliness in that game. There's a lot of stuff that it works because of the way the game looks. Like the fact that it's very basic 3D, the fact that they have to be very expressive with their animations and the way they move in order to like get across that Barrett's angry. He's got to like really like be huge because they have no facial animation, they have no voice acting, they have nothing else. So there's a lot of humor that is easy to do in that style of a game that doesn't necessarily work when you have like hyperrealism. Like the fact that the characters jump like almost like everywhere they go, they're like jumping out of a train and they're like jumping down the stairs and they're like jumping over here. These huge leaps. Like that's not going to be in the remake. They're not going to come out of the train and like freaking like jump down the stairs. You know what I mean?
I don't know. I feel like they did that in Advent Children, right?
My problem with doing like a full like remake, like realistic, everything like that is we kind of have to boil down like what made Final Fantasy VI so great is that it was able to express so much within its simplicity, and that's why I consider it like a masterpiece in that regard. And if you make it too realistic, that charm is gone.
Yes.
And I feel like that may be something that, like you said, that Final Fantasy VII Remake may lack unless they do a really good job like retaining the spirit of the, simplicity and charm of it. But I just don't see how they'll be able to do that.
Yeah, well, I think you hit it right on the head. That a lot of the appeal of early Final Fantasy was the charm that came from how they were expressive within the limits of what they had. So Final Fantasy V's big googly eye expressions and the big exclamation mark that come over their head. There were things like that you look and you chuckle at, or it feels so charming because they're trying to express something to you with these tiny little characters on a screen. And it's just they came up with these creative ways of getting past those barriers and working within abstractions to show that to you. But the closer to reality that you get, the less you need abstractions to express those things. You can express somebody being angry by looking at very subtle features on the face at this point. And so it just by the nature of it being a more grounded, realistic aesthetic is going to lose some of that charm. So you're not going to have the same charm. You're not going to be able to have the characters big googly eye come up like that. It's not going to look right. So how do you create a new sense of charm within it? That's the big question for the FF7 remake for me. So I would say my answer to this, because I don't really love the look of the Secret of Mana remake either. I think that I would rather have FF6 done in that style, basic 3D models and an overhead view that's more or less a map for map recreation. That's what I would want to see, but I would like to see them do something that's a little bit more of a striking style. Maybe something that reflects a little bit more of Amano's art or something like that, but done into like a 3D model versus like these bland, basic 3D models that they're doing for Secret of Mana.
How would you feel if it was more like the FF4 DS remake?
That's the only thing about that game I don't like is the graphics. I think that it looks a little silly. Because they like when Kain and Cecil march and they first like head out of Baron to go to the Valley of Mist, and you have Kain come out and he says something, I can't remember what he says, and then Cecil's like, "I'll be relying on you," and then Kain says, "And you have nothing to fear." Like you have this really like well written, awesome, well delivered, awesome like line like that come out of this like deformed, like freaky looking face. So I wouldn't. Of course, if they were to do it in a style like that, it would be better in HD, obviously, than it would have been on the DS. So maybe if they evolved that style a little bit and they added more detail to the faces and they animated them a little bit, maybe that could actually look pretty cool. But I don't know.
Here's the problem from my point of view: is there seems to be this growing assumption that people operate on that because it's newer or that it's 3D or it's AAA that it's going to be better, and like I don't really think that's the case. I mean, the reason I'm okay with it with Final Fantasy VII to an extent is because while Final Fantasy VII when it came out was revolutionary, very quickly games surpassed that like super deformed look, and it almost feels kind of fitting. Whereas with Final Fantasy VI, that game like in its original make was like some of the I think, some of the best art for a Super Nintendo game. So you're taking something that was like cream of the crop, and then to make it into like what they did with the Final Fantasy IV remake, which was pretty good. I like that remake. But when you look at those graphics, I don't get the impression that like this is like their top team that's like working on this. It doesn't feel like there's a lot of passion in it. And I'm not trying to say that people that worked on that didn't work hard on the project, but it just, I don't know. To me, it doesn't. You lose some of the heart that was in the original game when you take something and assume just because it's 3D now or improved graphically that it's going to be better. I mean, it's just not going to be the same.
This is my opinion on my personal opinion on the best way to do it. I think the Final Fantasy IV PSP version absolutely nailed it. They did everything. They just HD the sprites. They HD like the environments, everything like that. Now, granted, they kind of did that with the mobile / PC version of Final Fantasy VI, but as we all know, they did not do a good job redoing these characters.
Dude, the characters look like they look like they drew the characters in like Microsoft Paint or something. Like it looks terrible. Like I'm like, who looked at this and thought this was good?
They have no concept of bilinear filter. And
no, the filtering's terrible. Jeez, it's so bad. Anyways. Yeah, I think if I'm going to pick between the two, I'm going with the Secret of Mana look. But I would hope that they would sort of imprint a more unique art style onto basic models like that is kind of what I would want to see.
Now, I'm not going to lie, though. I could totally get down on some Final Fantasy VI, like a AAA remake. Like, I know it wouldn't be as good as the original, but like I think it would be really cool to be able to run around in that world and that kind of perspective. So I mean, if they did do that, I would still be excited. But yeah, if they called me up and they're like, "Hey, Hat, Secret of Mana remake or 7 remake," I would tell them, let's be conservative here. You're probably not going to knock the 7 remake style out of the park. Let's go Secret of Mana. You know.
I don't know if you guys ever played the PS1 version of FF6, but they had CG animated scenes, and
yes.
they did a pretty decent job recreating Yoshitaka Amano's art in 3D. So if they did do a full 3D remake of it and did it in that style, like,
but that was Square's golden years, though, when they did that, though, right?
I guess so, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, hypothetically, if they did it that way, I would be for it, but I would still worry about that it would not be able to give the same charm and simplicity as the original title. They would have to take it to a new approach and make it its own thing to
for sure
make it appealing.
For sure. Tetsuya Nomura directing the Final Fantasy VI remake. It's just be completely humorless.
He'd have to add like super complicated like character arcs.
He would at least make them look better.
Give it that
mess paint
touch.
Well, and that's true. Is that he's a character artist, right? So like, would he even have the, I don't know if humility is the right word, but to allow Yoshitaka Amano's look to be the look of a game he's directing, or would he have to create all those characters?
I mean, he did like the art for Dissidia, and he was for the most part very faithful to each of the characters Amano designs, so he could probably do it.
Yeah,
I'm trying to imagine what Terra would look like with a bunch of belt buckles on her outfit.
Zippers.
No, I think it would be cool regardless.
All right, let's move on to this question from this guy Hat here.
Yeah,
that guy. I have to say
that guy.
Let us say you sit down with an RPG that you've never played before. What should happen in the first hour or two of that RPG, from both a narrative and a gameplay experience, to help to keep you engaged? To me, whether it's a book, a TV show, or a movie, the opening moments will either capture my interest or make me turn towards something else. So I think the first hour is critically important. This principle is actually true of almost any media that you can think of, but it changes a little bit depending on what it is. So games are very, very long, right? Especially RPGs in the 30 to 60 hour range. So what happens in the first hour, I think, is pretty appropriate. Like, what happens within that first hour to keep me engaged? If the first hour isn't hooking me, what are my chances of continuing with it, right? With YouTube videos, the rule is 5 seconds. You've got generally about 5 seconds to hook somebody, especially when you're going for like a viral video. You got about 5 seconds to keep people's attention before they'll click away. That's the attention span on the internet versus the attention span in a JRPG, let's say. Within a film, it's generally about the first 5 to 10, sometimes maybe 15 minutes. You got about that much time to really hook your audience before they're going to start thinking about turning it off or going to something else or they're getting bored. I don't know specifically what it is for a book, but I would think first chapter. What happens in the first chapter or your prologue chapter or something like that makes the reader go, okay, let me dive into this a little bit. So what needs to happen within the first hour or two of an RPG to keep you hooked? Why don't you guys go first, and then I'll think about it a little bit.
Well, for me, it really depends on the context of what you're trying to create with said story. But for me, if we want to go like something like Final Fantasy style JRPG, I truly believe it needs to start on a very strong note, like an action scene or a very important scene that starts it with. I feel like the action of it is what are going to get RPG players immediately engaged with it. And if I want to put examples in, like the first hour of Final Fantasy IX, like you're having like this crazy like theater heist going to kidnap the princess, and all these crazy things are happening in between, and you're getting introduced to the characters, and that's pretty awesome. And then you got Final Fantasy 15 that just starts with them just like pushing a car and going to a gas station to fix their car. It's like you are already starting to fail me and getting generating interest. I feel like I have to go out and find my own interest with it. But then you got Final Fantasy 7, which starts off on this crazy awesome mission to blow up the Mako reactor. And then you got Final Fantasy 8, which has a beautiful opening CG, but you pretty much start off like the basic, like this is your tutorial, and you know you're in school, and it's not till like almost an hour getting out that you're actually going to go to caves and get a Guardian Force. And admittedly, I had a hard time getting into Final Fantasy VIII right at the start, but then it started building up and started getting a lot better. And then so I think to engage in a battle-centric type of JRPG, I think you just really need to start with a bang. And like even admittedly, something like 13 started off strong with lightning coming in. The execution we can discuss, but started with lightning coming in and just like tearing everything up, and then just getting right into the hearty action of it was pretty fun in itself.
Yeah, I think for me, really, especially with RPG games, I need to be sold on not necessarily the plot, because that's going to be something that's going to be unfolding over the entire course of the game. I don't even have to really have a strong sense of the whole cast. I just want to be sold on the world itself. I want to feel like within the first hour or two, I have a pretty good grasp of what it's like in this world, right? And I think the games that I really like Final Fantasy VII, do a really good job of that. I mean, like you said, within the first hour, we're like blowing up a reactor. They're telling us all about Shenra. Like, I mean, we're getting a good sense of what it's like in this world. And I think if you don't sell that to me, you just spend too much time focusing on explaining all the different menu systems, focusing on explaining the gameplay. It loses that charm or that immersion that you need to sustain you over the entire game. I mean, outside of that, I think the only other thing I would say is just, I think there has to be a question that's you're constantly like feeling like it's right around the corner that you're about to find out, to keep me engaged anyway. So
yeah. I know I'm going to rile some people saying this, but the reason that I did not get far in Trails in the Sky, that I didn't even get past the hour point in that game, was because I immediately got bored with it. Like, they just talked too much about, I felt like they just talked too much about something that didn't feel very relevant to the story. They just kept going on long and like on and on and on. And like, I immediately got bored with it, and I turned it off and went to switch to something else. Now, I will give it a fair chance one day. and I will, get through the parts I don't like, and because people tell me over and over it's a great game, so I'm going to take their word for it. But I mean, they did a really poor job on getting me engaged with that game right at the start.
Here's an example of a popular game where I think what Eric's is saying is the same way for me, right? So Persona 4.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, for the first two, dude, the only reason I kept playing that game is because people told me it was great. If you had not told me it was great, I would not have continued to play that game, because that game takes so long for you to figure out anything, and like it's just so slow in the beginning. So
yeah, that's actually the same exact example I was going to bring up. I did a first look on this, and I was forewarned. People were telling me, listen, you're going to have to do more than your typical hour first look on this. Because that's kind of what first look was. And it's funny that it sort of fell into that form. I didn't plan it that way. But the idea is I'm going to play the first hour of an RPG, see if I like it, and decide when I'm going to play through this for the channel, for a review. And it was like, that's kind of what ended up happening was, does the game hook me in an hour or not? Which is sort of very relevant to this question that you asked. So for me, you guys brought up in medias res, which is starting out in the middle of an action scene or something really exciting off the bat. That's a good way to do it. I don't think it's always the best way to do it, and I think Final Fantasy XIII is a prime example of a game that should not have started in medias res, because too much of the game's exposition is not established early on for me to fully understand what's going on and what's happening. You contrast that to, let's just use Final Fantasy VII as an example. The first bombing mission lasts roughly 15 to 20 minutes, probably 20 minutes tops. And then you get through that and you're on the train and you have Jessie explaining what the city of Midgar's construction is like. She's giving you background on the world you're in and how it works and how it operates. And then you get down into the slums and you see that this is a very different place from the place up there. And you have this like idea of power struggle between the people and Shinra and Mako as a concept and the fact that it's being used as energy, but it's killing the planet. Like all of this relevant exposition that establishes the central conflict of the story is given to you on top of gameplay right away. Within the first hour, you have battled and you have an idea of who am I fighting? What is the conflict? What do these characters care about? Who are these characters? What's their personality? What do they want? Every single bit of that exposition is given alongside of exciting gameplay within, I would say, half an hour. It doesn't even take a full hour to get there. That is incredibly important to keep people hooked in a long RPG like that.
Oh, I entirely agree.
Yeah, and Final Fantasy XIII gets the battles going, even though it's not unlocked. I mean, so much of that battle system is not introduced until 20 hours into the game. But you have fighting, you have battling going on, you have characters introduced. It's a little bit harder to say that you understand like the villain or the goal, because they're given their focus. And I guess you could argue that the idea is that the struggle against fate is really at the central of the conflict of what's going on, not necessarily Bartandalus or Daisley or any of the other villain characters in the story. But for a long time, the characters are a bit aimless. And it's not clear what the objective is. It's not clear what they're supposed to do. But I'm not saying that again. A lot of people have brought up, and I agree to a large extent, that the central conflict of 13 has nothing to do with that as much as it is the internal conflict of how do I escape my fate? Can I escape my fate? Can I change my fate? So when you're looking at it under that lens, yes, that conflict is brought up quickly enough. But I think a lot of people, that was lost on them, and they were saying, who's the villain? What am I doing? What do these characters, what's going on? And so you had this portion of the audience that got lost real early, And it doesn't help that the tutorial is 20 hours long. And so by the time that you understand the full context of what's happening and you have the entire battle system unlocked to you, you've lost a ton of people. And now all those people say all you do is press X and auto battle to win. All you do is this, and then these characters are annoying, but they didn't stick around long enough. And I'm not saying, okay, I'm trying really careful to tread here. I'm not saying that even if you did hang through and you didn't like the game, that you're wrong. I'm not saying any of that. I'm just saying that a lot of people got lost early. And it's because even though they had an in medias res scene, a lot of that relevant exposition was not given quickly enough to keep people engaged. I think that that's a statement of fact. I don't think that that's even an opinion. I think it's not saying that it was wrong or right. It's saying that a lot of people did not get hooked by it. And they lost a big portion of the audience. And I think that in Persona 4, that's exactly what happened to me. I didn't fight a battle. I don't know for how long it took before you had your first battle in the game. It was freaking crazy.
Yeah, it was
well over an hour. What's the conflict? What's the problem? What's the stakes? So much of that takes so long to be established because, again, for that game, a big part of it is all about the relationships. It's about the character interactions and the whole, what's the system called? It's their version of Affinity. I can't remember what it is. I didn't get far enough to even know what it is. Anyways, there's a whole lot to the simulation aspect.
Right.
The being in school and balancing that alongside of these escapades into this other world or whatever. And since that's a big part of it, and that didn't engage me at all, it really lost me very quickly. And it took way too long to get into the parts of Persona that I think would have hooked me.
I think Atlas actually addressed and took that criticism in, because if you start Persona 5, it puts you right into the action, right at the start.
Good.
Absolutely. In medias res scene right at the beginning of Persona 5. I've actually been through that scene. It's pretty wild. It's really good. It starts with a heist, basically. You guys are all there with the masks on, and they're there to steal something, and he's hopping along up above in this, I think it's a casino or something like that. But in any case, yeah, I think Persona 5 learned a little bit from the slow pace of Persona 4.
Do you know who I think did a really good job introducing and establishing itself without combat necessarily? And I know I'm going to feel typical for saying this, Chrono Trigger.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Chrono Trigger did a good job establishing its world simply by going through the festival. You got a good idea of how the people are. It took you through some of the gameplay mechanics by just playing the games. You got an idea of choices you make. You can make choices in the game, rather when you bump into Marley or decide to do certain attractions and stuff like that. It did a good job explaining a lot of the game, and it did a good job establishing the world and the characters and how they are normally before the series of events happen. And still within that same hour, the whole aspect of the time traveling, and
yep,
it's just all introduced, and it's just done so well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead.
I was just going to say, yeah. I mean, even if you're taking your time in that festival, within an hour for sure, you're going through the portal and you're going back to 680. There's no way I can think of unless you play Chrissy or something. For any of you who don't know that, that's my girlfriend. We do stream sometimes. She plays through games very, very, very slowly. But
just get in the portal. Get in the portal.
Please go to the scene now. But and I mean, unless you are just obsessively trying to click on every tile of the screen to see if there's treasure and talking to every single person multiple times and trying mini games over and over again, there is no way you don't get through that portal within 1 hour in Chrono Trigger. I would say it's probably less. It's probably 40 minutes, 30 minutes. You're into the time travel aspect and you're back in time and there's battles and stuff.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I'm seeing a pretty consistent trend here. I think now that we're actually talking about it, I'm thinking with me, I think it's more important that if we're going to use that first hour, let's say the first half hour is I like when it sells you that the game's one type of thing, but then in the second half hour, right? Like you said with Chrono Trigger, you jump in the portal and all of a sudden you're just like, wait, what? What? I had no idea we were doing time travel. And all of a sudden you're just like, okay, let me see what's going on here, right? I won't spoil it really, but like one game that does do that very well is Tales of Berseria. I was playing the first half hour of that game or so, and I was just like, I don't know. Like, I think I shouldn't have bought this. Okay, let me see what's going on with these people. And then I'm not gonna say really what happens, but I'm just by the end of the hour, you're just like, okay, I'm in. Like, I did not see any of this happening. Like, this is crazy. Like, Jesus Christ, what's going on? So, I mean, I think I mean, Final Fantasy X did that too. I mean, you start off, you're just like walking around a city, like, you're like, oh, this is kind of lame. And then by the end of that hour, you're
bam.
like on a boat somewhere in the middle of the ocean. You're like, wait, what? You know?
How did I get here? Holy crap. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Even then, the interest kind of sparks like right at the beginning when Titus is like going like, "This is my story. Let me tell you what happened." It's like you see what's around you and how they're like just a campfire, just kind of like just laying there, like they're worried about something that's upcoming, and you're kind of already interested from there what's going on, and then like you're taken to like a much simpler setup after that, and it's kind of intriguing you, going like, well, what's going on here that's eventually going to lead us up to there, and that causes a lot of interest in different ways.
And then you got heavy metal Sin coming in to destroy the city. That took me off guard for sure the first time I played the game. I was like, what is this music, man? This is crazy.
This is a Final Fantasy.
Like that. Final Fantasy at all. Now I do, but back then I didn't.
Yeah. So anyways, any other thoughts you guys have? I think that's pretty much what I would say about what needs to happen in the first hour. But
go with the bang, rather if it's combat or not.
Yep. Just
Exactly.
Establish the conflict and have us play the freaking game. Let me play the freaking game within an hour. If I'm not playing the game yet, I'm going to get antsy.
And I do
think
not.
That's what I said over and over in Persona 4 First Look.
And I do not want to push a car in the first hour. Don't have me do that.
Push car. Don't want to push a car. I want to play the game. All right. Okay. Another question here from this guy Velhart.
Ooh.
What do you believe that Western RPGs can learn from Japanese RPGs and vice versa? What do you believe JRPGs can learn from WRPGs? Sometimes one side tries to use elements from the other and at times falls flat on their face, like some JRPGs attempting open world when I believe they do not have strong understanding on how to make an open world work. Are there any examples? I think you were probably referring to Final Fantasy 15 or maybe Xenoblade a little bit there, Xenoblade X. Any other examples that you had in mind when you asked that question that you felt like this isn't really working, they don't understand the concept?
Those are the ones that come to mind the strongest. I think I have a hard time recalling in my head other open world centric JRPGs.
Sure. Okay, so yeah, I mean, I think that's the easiest one to start off on, is that there have been several very big mainstream WRPGs in the last 10 years. Skyrim was the one that really blew it up, I think. That's when open world became a, like, everyone's got to do it thing now. You had games before that with the way they handle things like quest structure, like Assassin's Creed and things like that, that were incorporated as well into Skyrim, and then from there kind of like became in everything. So Skyrim's a good example from a WRPG that's had huge influence. The Witcher, I think, is another more recently. Dark Souls, but that was made in Japan, so I mean, it's a WRPG, but it's made in Japan. But the idea is that that kind of game has sort of blown up a little bit, and we've seen some of those aspects started to be inserted into some of the franchises that have traditionally been more in line with the philosophy that evolved from the JRPG. So Final Fantasy 15 being open world, having quest structure very similar to that of games like Skyrim or The Witcher or something like that. However, they're not as highly praised in Final Fantasy 15, those elements, as they were in these other examples. So what is it that was lost in translation, so to speak? What is it that they didn't realize? I believe in Final Fantasy 15's case, and this goes for actually all games, like you can't start out with a story in mind and then say, well, it's got to be an open world game, and try to make it work. You have to make the decision about what your gameplay is going to be in line with what your story and themes are so that they match. Final Fantasy 15 is a story about a prince on the run trying to keep his head low as he's being chased by an empire. There's a lot of urgency to collect the royal arms and get to Altissia, where his fiancée is waiting for him. Tons of urgency. The game is about exploring this vast area, doing side quests for the freaking guy at the gas station, and picking up tomatoes for whoever over here, and killing 5 of this type of enemy for this person. It's a game about doing errands for people when the story is about urgency and staying low and not making yourself known and hurrying to a destination when you have the power that you need. I feel like the game story is suited much more or much better for a linear design. And I mean, they had to. They eventually forced you into that at the end, right? But you have to know ahead of time what kind of story are we trying to tell, and does that story suit an open world? Contrast that with The Witcher. The Witcher's story is about finding Ciri, a needle in a haystack, so to speak. What better design philosophy is there than open world for that? She's out there somewhere. Where? We don't know. We got to locate her. Let's go start talking to people and find out in this big open place. Story fits design, and that's why it works.
On top of that, Geralt is a witcher, and
Yes.
going around from village to village, helping people in need is part of his job.
It's his
Yes.
profession. It makes sense. When you're a prince, does not make sense that you're going to get
Catching
frogs for
frogs.
people. You know?
So here's really what it comes down to, I think, even on a deeper level. Western RPGs, and again, I'm speaking in general terms. I'm not saying every Western RPG. Not all. Hashtag not all. Can't believe I have to say that every single time. Generally speaking, Western RPGs have larger focus on world building and lore and role-playing elements, traditional role-playing elements. You're stepping into the shoes of somebody, role-playing that person's life within this world that they've created. So that suits already a more open setting. Exploration. What does this world contain? Japanese role-playing games traditionally are more about character. They've designed a person. They want to tell a story about that person. They want to delve into that person's personal life and issues and growth and development. That suits a linear storytelling design. And because of that, you have Final Fantasy 15, which is trying to tell that kind of story, but is trying to take elements that are popular from this genre over here that has a very different focus in terms of what it's trying to create for the player. Skyrim's character doesn't matter. It's a blank slate character. They're not going to do character development. They're not focusing on the person. They're focusing on the world. And JRPGs are all focused on the people in the party. It's kind of a collectivist sort of like thought process behind designing a story about people, and they need each other, versus a more individualistic sort of mindset over here. I'm a lone person in this big world. What am I going to do? What am I going to make myself into? It's two very different philosophies from two very different cultures who think very differently. And so this culture sort of crafted this kind of game, and this culture crafted this kind of game, and the culture over here is the one that's blown up. And they've had some games that have been huge mainstream successes, and this culture over here is going, oh, open world is real popular. Let's adopt that. but it doesn't fit at all the collectivist mindset and the very strong focus on character for the type of stories they're trying to tell. It's just opposed diametrically. It's just not meant, it just doesn't work. So that, I think, is sort of the center of what the two cultures, I think, can learn about each other and the type of games that they make. And if you want to adopt part of what they're doing well, you have to realize the reason behind it. So if a WRPG wants to adopt something from the culture of the Japanese RPG, understand the reasons why behind it first and make sure that your game is centered or focused on that too. So if you want to tell a very character-driven story and you want to have a lot of style in it like the Japanese do, then make sure that you're not telling a blank slate character open world thing. You know what I mean? It's not going to fit, and vice versa. That's what I would say.
You're so ridiculously spot on with that. I feel like it's hard to contribute more to that point, because that's the main concern I had with games like Final Fantasy 15 and Xenoblade Chronicles X, is that it felt like they were trying to meet a quota with the open world instead of trying to figure out, okay, how do we take the elements of people that love about JRPGs and these new elements that is loved by the mainstream media and incorporate into one thing. And usually with that type of setup, you have to make a game first before you create a world and story with it. And and that's kind of like the Nintendo mindset, is like you have to create the game and the world first, and then paint the coat over it. And that's kind of how you have to make a successful open world with it. Now, granted, I'm not saying you can't do it reverse the other way. It's just saying it's very gameplay centric, the open world. It's not known to make narrative stronger, at least in a JRPG's case. And in Final Fantasy 15, I really feel like the open world is more in the way and then actually helping, because I wanted to go through the core experience and try to just get the story. And I felt like I didn't get a strong focus on the narrative of the story until it actually got linear on the train. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. And I was very disappointed by that aspect. And then we had Xenoblade X, where the first game was able to bring a nice mix of linearity with exploration elements in it. And then we had Xenoblade X, where it was like, do a bunch of these side quests till you have enough like affinity with someone to go like continue in the story. So it felt like a very hub, like the open world felt like an obstacle just to get somewhere, get that part done, and then go back to the hub. And that's something to me that got tedious really fast with it. And I stopped being engaged with what JRPGs are usually known for, is having a very powerful narrative with, strong characters.
Not only that, with X too, is that they blocked off certain story missions until you had completed certain side quests. So like you couldn't even continue with the main story until you had done a bunch of other surrounding stuff, a bunch of side content first.
Yeah, that's
and
such
then
a
they would let you continue.
Breaker.
Yeah.
It seems to me when I approach Western RPGs, it seems every single one I've played my entire life, it always feels as if the people that wrote the story, they kind of wrote it from a more like we're fans of books, right, or novels, and we think like this would be very cool if we could run around in this world, and it seems to mesh very well with that type of storytelling. Usually, a lot of times, it has some like pretty witty dialogue, but when I play JRPGs, they seem, at least in the past, they seemed much more cinematic, much more like, I guess, anime, right? Or like a TV show or a movie. And it seems to come from that perspective. So I would say that if there's anything I want from Western RPGs to take from JRPGs is just, like you said, substance or presentation. I mean, the characters in JRPGs tend to have very, very strong personalities, great character development. They seem and feel like real people. You're really engaged with their character arc, and that's not to say other Western RPGs don't do that too. I've been playing Witcher 3 lately, and that game's great for that. But a lot of Western RPGs, I don't feel like the characters are as strong as some of the other JRPGs. Now, it's been several decades, so you can point all over the place. Games that have done all that and more. But that's kind of what I would want Western RPGs to take from JRPGs. Now, Japanese RPGs, I really, really want them to understand like how gameplay is so interwoven into the actual plot and the actual setting of the game itself. I mean, just like you said, Final Fantasy 15. I mean, it makes no sense that that's an open world game, right? It seems like they don't quite get it. Like, we're just going to tell you this like movie-like experience or a story, and that kind of reference or frame, and then if you want to, you can go ahead and do this other type of game also. It's almost like two games in one. Whereas like you said, you're trying to find a character in the story like Witcher 3, and it just feels like this makes sense. This is interwoven for a open world game. It makes sense. And if I don't know, man, if JRPGs could just take that understanding and run with it, I think they could really just do some amazing things.
Yeah, the thing is also that Western RPGs are more focused on the player creating their own adventure, and the narrative within it helps drive that aspect along. And JRPGs like to tell you the story that they made for you. Everyone, for the most part, is engaging in the same story with that. And games like Skyrim and Witcher, Witcher still has a set story to go find Ciri, but like everyone has like their own experience on how they led to those points of the story. Like, you don't have to go in the direction that they're telling you to. You can like do what you want to get to that point. And Final Fantasy 15 kind of tried to do that with a road trip theme to it, but it just wasn't executed well enough in that regard. So yeah, basically Western RPG, create your adventure. JRPG, we want to tell you a story.
Yeah. There was something I was going to add to that, and I just lost it. What was it? Motomu Toriyama, the director of Final Fantasy X, X-2, and 13 trilogy. Back when I was doing the Final Fantasy X review and I was doing research, he had a quote where he said, I'm paraphrasing, he said more or less, he felt that linearity was essential to telling an engaging story. And I think he's halfway right. I don't think that nails quite on the head, because I think The Witcher is an example of telling a very compelling story. Even if you're not necessarily into like the campaign of like the main game, like it's DLC expansions, like Hearts of Stone, tell unbelievably engaging stories in an open world. So it's not that you can't tell an engaging story in an open world. It's that if you're going to tell the kind of story that is super character focused and is an internal struggle, let's say like Final Fantasy 13 is. 13 is really more about what's happening within the people than it is about what's happening to the people on the outside. I mean, that stuff plays into it, but it's more about them searching internally for, am I going to accept my fate? Am I going to break my fate? Can I break my fate? That kind of thing. So if you're going to look to tell a story with characters like that, and that's the kind of story you're looking for, it's just much easier to tell a compelling story of that fashion within this linear sort of style. But if your story is more focused on the outward things, and not to say that there won't be internal struggle, not to say that you won't have character arcs, but the plot's more focused on what's happening around you, what's happening to the world, what are you going to do to affect that world. I think an open world structure works a bit better for that kind of story. So, yeah, it's just about finding what is the core of what you're trying to say or what you're trying to do narrative-wise, if it's a narrative-driven game, and then choose from there where that fits, which philosophy is going to fit and is going to best help me deliver that story. So, yeah. Anything you guys want to add to that?
I guess try to dive into what can Western RPGs learn from JRPGs. I suppose that is I don't know, because Western RPGs seem to just know what they are and a lot of times embrace it. I'm trying to think of a Western RPG that uses a lot of JRPG aspects.
I think that a good example, let's say like Skyrim. A lot of people weren't super like into the main plot of Skyrim. They more or less got lost in the guild quests. I remember the first time I played Oblivion. Actually, I got like a Game of the Year edition that came with all the expansions, and the Knights of the Nine expansion. I didn't know this, but like I started playing the game, and the game starts out, you get out of the Imperial City or whatever, and then I almost immediately got started on the quest line that led to Knights of the Nine, and I remember thinking like that was what the story of the game was. Right? Like I was like, oh, Knights of the Night, this is a pretty cool story. And then like obviously that's a shorter expansion. It's not as long as the main campaign. It came to an end. I was like, oh, it's pretty short. It was like, oh my gosh, that was just an expansion story. That's not actually like the content of the main game. I think that storytelling wise, Western RPGs can sometimes lose a lot of people. I know a lot of people who, they would hear how highly I would talk about The Witcher, and they would be like, oh, this beginning is so boring. Like, just the whole, when you're in Velen and you're going through the whole story, which I think is a fascinating story with the Bloody Baron. But, a lot of people are like, oh, this is losing me. Like, when is, like, the real threat going to come in? Like, what's really going on with the Wild Hunt? And, they got lost a little bit. I think that style and presentation, we talked a little bit, I think Hat talked about cinematography, like cinematic presentation. Especially if you go back to like Infinity Engine RPGs like Baldur's Gate and Planescape Torment. Like, they tell fascinating stories that have really deep lore, but for the most part, you're looking at this wide view, top down, looking at little tiny dudes on the screen, not animated really, just kind of sitting there reading. And even since the beginning, JRPGs have really focused on that strong presentation, animating the scenes with the characters and trying to give a more cinematic experience, more exciting presentation and style with the way that they deliver their stories. Somebody was asking me this week on one of my Final Fantasy 13 videos, like, hey, Mike, would you say that you like the story of Final Fantasy 7 better or the story of The Witcher better? And I was really sitting there thinking about it, like, that's so hard because
it's apples and oranges.
Yeah. It's so different. And that's the reason I came up with is The Witcher. I love the lore and the world and the kind of slow burning intrigue and the grounded nature of it, and the dialogue is super great. But there's no Nibelheim incident scene in The Witcher. There's no...
I look at it as Final Fantasy VII is a great movie and The Witcher 3 is a great TV series.
Or
or maybe even novel or something, right?
Yeah.
There's no scene that just punches me in the gut in The Witcher. And I'm like, oh, whoa, what? But like every scene's executed so well that it was just like, I'm just nodding my head like that was a great line. Oh, I see what's going on here. There's some plotting going on. I don't know if I should trust that person. I'm intrigued, and it's slow burning, and it's moving gradually. But there was nothing like waking up in the cell in the Shinra building and the trail of blood. And like, what happened? What's going on? What? that moment of Final Fantasy VII had. And I think that kind of style is something that I think could definitely be adopted. Now, games have become more cinematic. Western RPGs have. Games like Mass Effect and The Witcher have definitely become more cinematic, way, way more than the Infinity Engine RPGs. So that's helped a lot already. But I think that there's still like a certain level of style and then just moments of awe that you get in the really great JRPGs, scope-wise, that aren't quite as strong, I would say, in WRPGs that I've played. So maybe that's one thing they could learn.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of a dork in that in addition to playing all the other different video games that I play, I also really like going back and playing some of the beginning games, right? And if you go back and play some of the really early like text adventures, right, that originated in the United States with like games like Zork and such like that, they're very much were supposed to be like an interactive novel type deal, right? Where you go around in this novel and the story and you can interact with the room, you can solve puzzles, but it's telling you a story. And that's, I think, is kind of where, at least from my perspective, Western RPGs ended up developing from. Whereas I think, especially with games like Final Fantasy, which are, huge JRPG, if you see interviews with Sakaguchi, a lot of what influenced him were things like Star Wars, right? So I think that it's just like you said, a cultural thing that like it's just where they're drawing their inspiration from. I think a lot of like Witcher 3. I'm playing it right now and I love it, but it's definitely like you said, it's a different experience in a Final Fantasy game. I just finished Horizon Zero Dawn last week, and I love that game. I loved it way more than I thought I would, but I mean, I have to admit, like the story was great, I think, but I think a lot of that had to do with how engaging the gameplay was for me as well, right? Whereas comparatively to most JRPGs, the gameplay is rarely excellent, but I mean, it just, I don't know, there's something about it that just the
style,
way they,
the style.
the style,
can keep you hooked.
I think one of the biggest turnoffs with me with Bethesda RPGs, and I'm not calling them out at all. I mean, I think they're great games for what they do, but the thing that always keeps turning me off on games like Skyrim and Fallout is that there's not really engaging NPCs in that game. Like, I mean, the aspect of questing and exploring the world is fun in itself, but I always feel like they don't ever hit the right note with me and having interesting characters. I kind of feel like they always come out as like run-of-the-mill or something like that, especially with how stiff they feel a lot of times in those games. And I feel like that's something with Western RPG sometimes. I'm growing more into it because I'm starting to understand more over time, but I really feel like sometimes that they could try to focus on making like some engaging characters at least at the beginning to kind of get you like more motivated into getting to know NPCs in the world. And JRPGs definitely do better in establishing characters. Like when I played Skyrim, like I felt just kind of lost because I didn't just feel engaged enough to go out and find out what's what, because I don't feel like I really had a strong character around me to motivate me to keep going.
If you think about it, and this has always been a criticism that I've had of Western RPGs, it's a love-hate relationship, but if you're going to have a game where you can choose or make all these different decisions and all these different plot lines can develop based off your decision, and they have to they have to build all these plot lines through all these different decision trees, right? Naturally, it's just going to happen. You're not going to have like a super like engaging plot with like great cinematography. It's going to be a little more, laid back than you would get with a game that tells one single story and they put all their focus on telling that one masterful narrative, so.
Sure. I will say, getting older now, I'm like almost 29, and like I feel like I'm growing more towards like the Western RPG style of games more than JRPG. Now, I still love JRPGs, but like I'm seeing more of the appeal of Western RPGs and its presentation. It's just over time. I'm not exactly sure what it is. I think it's just me getting older, but I'm starting to see more of the design decisions they did and why they did it, and I kind of appreciate it more for that. But for some reason, I just still can't get into Skyrim or Fallout.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, especially if like NPCs are really important to you, because like not only do the characters themselves come off as a little flat in Bethesda RPGs, but a lot of times they'll be voiced by the same people. So you'll have the same voicing, you'll have like 10 voice actors basically that do all the voices for like every NPC in the game. Well, so it's like they all start to feel samey.
And that's the thing though, like, I mean, I don't know any, actors like off the top of my head that like from Skyrim, but I mean, if you look at games like Final Fantasy X, like the voice act, well, I can't remember his name, so I'm defeating my whole purpose, whole point. But the actor for Titus, right? I mean,
James Arnold Taylor. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, everyone knows. Well, not everyone, but a lot of people know who that guy is. I mean, the guy that does Cloud. I mean, there just seems to be a lot more emphasis on the presentation than in Western RPGs. But I am with Eric that for some reason lately I've been getting a little bit more in the Western RPGs, and I think it's because I've played so many JRPGs. I can kind of guess the plot line so early. Whereas with Western RPGs, at least if I'm choosing what I'm doing, it's hard for me to guess what's going to happen.
Actually, I think the series that actually a lot of times to me brings the best of both worlds. A lot of times is the Dragon Quest series. I think they do a good job on like implementing like some Western ideals and JRPG ideals into one, where you still have to go like on an adventure and kind of get an idea of where you need to go next, go like exploring and be adventurous. But at the same time, there's like enough of narrative and plot and interest in the characters, also, which more of the JRPG factor. It's probably one of my reasons why it's my favorite series. So,
stoked for DQ11, dude.
Stoked
for DQ11. It's gonna be great.
It's stuff like that tells me to go learn Japanese. But then again, it's I wonder what come out first, the Dragon Quest 11 or my ability to comprehend a second language.
Dude, it might ruin it. I think I like it better with just putting on like the Japanese audio and reading subtitles. It's almost...
That's true. You get the illusion that it's good voice acting because you didn't grow up in the culture, but then you learn Japanese, it's like, oh, wait a second. This isn't necessarily good voice acting either. Anyways, good topic. Let's move on to the last one. This will be real quick. Just a quick question. Something I wanted to answer publicly on a video for those who are curious. This comes from Matthew on Discord. When does a game deserve, or when should a game get, extreme in-depth analysis like you're doing with Final Fantasy XIII? I ask because I know some people are at least frustrated at how much time is being taken up with the series of videos and just don't care enough about FF13 super in-depth analysis, or both, to discuss it to such a degree. So, it might seem a little odd because since the Final Fantasy X review, I've been doing these discussion videos that sort of lead up to it. And the purpose of the discussion videos is for me to learn as much as possible. Because my goal is to make a review, to make a video where the fans of that game can come and feel like they're going back and they're revisiting something that meant something, so it was important to them. And so, like, that's above all else sort of the main goal with the videos that I make. While there is criticism, while there's history, while there's a lot of things that go into it that sort of surround it, at the center of the goal for the videos I make is to help a person, especially a fan of it, revisit that feeling they had, of that positive feeling, that enjoyment, that emotional tie that they had with that game. And it's very easy for me to do that with games that I had that connection with. So when I make a Final Fantasy VII review, I don't have to talk to other people to get connected to that feeling. It's already there. I can already express it. When I make a Chrono Trigger review, there's no problem connecting with that internal emotional tie. I can do it. I can feel it, and when I'm feeling it, I can then present it in a way that will touch other people in the same way. When I'm trying to talk about a game that I have no emotional connection to whatsoever, I have to rely on the fans to help me see what they're seeing in it. And so, I've done long discussion videos for Final Fantasy X, for Xenogears, for Final Fantasy 15, I did a set of 4 of them, I think. And for this one, it's going to come up on 7 different videos. And it's literally because I need 7 different videos to try and connect to what these people who love the game are seeing in it. So that when I make the video, even if I don't love the game, they'll be able to come and watch it and they'll go like, oh man, I love that game. Like, I remember like how I felt when I beat that game. And alongside that, maybe the second goal of the videos is to help people who don't like it get an appreciation for it maybe that they didn't have before, or at least understand why people like it. And on the flip side of that, help people who love the game and don't understand why people hate on it, help them understand what these people are criticizing and why it's legitimate and why they feel the way they do. Essentially, the video is meant to be a unifying thing. It's meant to bring both sides of a fan base together and help each other understand where you're coming from. And so that has been a goal of mine that has evolved as I've made these videos over time. That's not why I originally started doing it. And you'll see, if you were to go back and watch the very, very original Final Fantasy I review, and then you watch the latest Final Fantasy 12 review or Final Fantasy 10 review I've done, you'll see that that goal has evolved over the course of me making these videos. But that's the reason why I've done so many videos on FF13, is because I need it, not because I want to impress anybody with my analysis of it. It's to stir in people introspection and thought, so that they will relay to me why it is that they love it so much, why it is that they don't like it, so that I can see that from every perspective possible, and then help create a video that will bring everyone together and understand one another's point of view. So that's why I've had to do so many videos on FF13.
Yeah, I don't think there's a stronger example of this than Final Fantasy 13. I would say that is the most split game I have ever seen with a community ever. Is that game? It's like people absolutely love it, or they absolutely detest it, and it's so rare to find people like in the middle of it. It's it's hard to say. Like playing with you again, I've definitely aimed like towards more the negative side now. Like I felt like I was in the middle, but now I feel like I lean more towards the, this is not a good game.
Yeah.
Side. But the people who really love it, like, oh man, like that guy who sent you 106 pages, like go him. That is some dedication to something you love, and I mean I have to commend him for that. That's pretty pretty dedicated.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, I personally enjoy like. I'm just a subscriber on your channel. I'm a Patreon contributor, and I enjoy the discussion videos. I mean, even like you said, you started with the Final Fantasy X videos. I think one thing I like about it is because you tend to express more of your opinion in those discussion videos than you would in the review, right? Sure. So, and plus you get to see, it's kind of interesting to see the evolution of perspective. I think at the beginning of your Final Fantasy X discussion video, you said, well, to me, I'm not sure if Titus really changed that much. And then by the end of the discussion videos, you're actually like, well, I can actually see what you guys are saying. I didn't think about that. It's kind of interesting to see that change. And definitely for a game like 13 that's very divisive, it's very good or very interesting to see these variety of opinions. So, and, I know he wasn't saying he didn't like it, but it is I like him, so.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyways, hopefully that answers your question, and that's the end of our topics for today. So thank you everybody for joining us for the podcast. This is a good one. It's a long one too, almost 2.5 hours. So for anyone who's stuck around all the way to the end, you guys are beasts, or you're at work, or you're grinding in a JRPG. Hopefully this has helped pass the time to some extent. Please check out Hat and Eric's podcast, the Phoenix Edge podcast. RPG podcast, right?
Correct.
I will have a link in the description so that you can go to the channel and watch their stuff. And then they could find you on Pocket Cast or any of the audio-only versions or audio-only sources like iTunes, right, as well?
Yeah, just pretty much any podcatcher that you have, you should be able to find us. I've done searches in about 9 of them and came right up. Just Phoenix Edge RPG podcast.
Yeah, we're mostly a starting channel right now, but we're definitely keeping the momentum going. So expect to see more from us in the future.
Yeah. So go check them out, and if you're listening audio only to us, you can find Dark Pixel Gaming on YouTube. Just search Dark Pixel Gaming. It's going to be a Final Fantasy 13 review here pretty soon. And then I'm going to let you guys vote on what I should play next, because I'm going to spend almost the entire next year playing Final Fantasy 11. So you guys get to decide. You guys will get to decide what game you want me to analyze after Final Fantasy 13. It'll not be a Final Fantasy game. I'm done with well, I'm not done. I'm going to be playing Final Fantasy 11 all year. But what I'm saying is I'm done making videos about Final Fantasy for a little bit. So Chrono Cross is up there. We've got I just finished playing Vagrant Story. Very interested in getting into Suikoden. Well, I've played Suikoden 1 and 2, but in analyzing those. Golden Sun, Grandia. There's like all kinds of games I want to jump into. So I'm going to let the patrons vote on what the next one's going to be once Final Fantasy 13 video is done. So stay tuned. Have a great week. Appreciate you guys watching, and we'll see you again next time. Peace out.
See y'all.
See ya.